So, are you curious?
Curiosity Codex. I am your ardent enthusiast, Kyle Olson. It's no secret that it's nearly impossible to get a movie made. In today's chapter, Mandy Fabian is going to give us the strange, twisting path that she followed to be able to make her first movie. From close calls with big-name actors to watching a hot script go cold, only to see a cold script get hot. What was the magical sequence that finally got her movie the fabled green light? Plus, we'll go deep into the table read. How, where, who, and what do you get from it?
Chapter 10, Hell or High Water Time.
All right, so let's get to what we've people been wanting to know about, to hear about, and the creation of a movie from start to finish. Because you are in, you're in post production.
Yes.
On your movie right now.
Yes, we are in the final.
Which is a long process.
It is a very long process, and we are in the final long part of the process.
Okay. People have this idea of you hit and cut, and then the next day you've cut it, and then a week later up it goes. No, there's a whole another.
Yeah, we tried for that.
But let's roll back all the way
back.
to the beginning. Mm-hmm. So we now have we've established your bio and your bona fides. You've done all the stuff you've done. So at what point did you say, now I'm going to make a movie? Or was it that you had the idea for a thing and you went, this should be a feature and I should direct it? How did the genesis of Just Plus None sort of start for you?
Okay, well, it started with the short films. That's where me thinking that I could direct anything came to be, right? And then I did the television shadowing, and I've always been more of a movie buff anyway. I really love watching a movie because there's such a great completion in it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a story. There's a catharsis. There's no cliffhangers. It's just like, we're done.
You don't have to worry about cancellation and the story not being told.
Yeah, and I mean, in terms of commitment, you're like, I could bite this off in an hour and a half or 2 hours, whereas a series is, it's a real commitment. And it's my only thing for a while, because if I've only got an hour to watch a night, it's got to be this thing for weeks,
right? It's going to be the next 140 days to get through all of, whatever it is.
It's mind-boggling. I was like I would calculate up all the half-hour comedies that I watched, 6 seasons of, and I'm like, oh my God. That was a
true.
month of my
it
life
really
or
adds
whatever.
up, especially when you get into these Almost Sunny in Philadelphia or Friends or everything where you get, or Big Bang, where you get 10, 11, 12, 13 seasons. And back in the day, it was at least 20 episodes a season, if not 24.
26 is pretty standard, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
So, so I knew I could direct, and I wanted to, and I had written a bunch of feature scripts. Like, I had this real passion. I really got a sense for feature writing. We talked about that, I loved the idea that, it was just, there's a whole story with a bunch of like pieces of clothing, right, that's sort of laid out in front of you. And I like to place all the pieces out and then on the clothesline sort of hang where the different pieces of clothing go. Like, oh no, let's put the socks over here and let's put the shirt over here. And oh, this pair of pants has got to be our closer. And I loved, once I started to get the structure of screenplays, I really loved writing them. And television always sort of eluded me because of that very thing. It couldn't be just an idea or a cool beginning, middle, and end. It had to be something that had no end, that had such a meaty middle that you could generate story after story after story after story, So
and also leave the characters where you found them.
Yeah.
That is a whole nother skill set.
Yeah. Yep. And like a scenario, like with movies, you usually have to think of some sort of structure, right? It's like there's so much plot has to be driven in the movie, whereas a television, it's really just like, oh, the plot is, Barney gets a car.
Yeah.
So
antics ensue.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so I really loved movies, and I had written a bunch of movies, and it probably all started with, I had written this one movie that was very unconventional. I think I told you this one. It was called My Bromance, and it was a story about a straight guy who ends up dating a gay guy for 30 days because he's said that to his friends that he's cool enough to be gay and he could pull it off. Like all his best friends are gay. Everybody cool in his life is gay. And he's like, I could be gay. And they're like, no, you couldn't. And then there's a gay guy who's a total player. And he tells his friends, I could not have sex with somebody for 30 days. And they're like, no, you can't. So these two find each other. And it's a little bit How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days where they're dating. And then they're like, why is he not hitting on me? Why are they not hitting on me? Kind of thing. And they end up discovering they're better people when they're like, he's better when he's dating a gay guy. And he's anyway. It's, they don't end up together, but it's, spoiler alert. But it was this really unconventional, interesting, like Tootsie, right? Tootsie. He pretends to be gay and he ends up discovering all these things about himself. He's a better man for it. So I showed this to a producer friend of mine, and she kind of went nuts about it. She was like, "This is one of the best scripts I've ever read," and I was like, "Wow, you get me." And we started a process of she produced a couple shorts of mine, and we started this working relationship. So then I was like, "Okay, I want to make a movie. I really want to make a feature, but how do you?" I did the whole process of like, how do you get money for your movies?
Right.
And there's a cycle that I don't know if we've talked about it, but the cycle seems to be that, if you have a really hot script or some sort of reputation, or you have famous friends, or you have a really big shot agent who loves you desperately, or, you have some momentum, like there's all these things that sort of already need to be in place for you to write a script, find a financier, get a star attached, and then go. Usually it's like, if you have a celebrity, you can get $1 million, $3 million, $10 million for your movie, right? Sure. You package it. You give people your script and they go, oh my God, this is perfect for Jason Bateman wants to direct this, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Now, what I've seen from this process is this can take anywhere from 6 months to like 6 years, where Jason Bateman was attached, and then he fell off, and then we had Jason Segel, but then he fell on, Yeah. And it's this really tricky thing as television has developed too, because people aren't huge movie stars really anymore as much, right? Like you have the Marvel universe, but like television is so spread out.
Yeah. That you could have somebody who wins an Emmy or BAFTA or whatever, and nobody knows who they are.
And nobody's ever seen that show, and nobody knows who they are. So having like a Jennifer Aniston or like a Matt Damon, although he was never a TV guy, but it's very
Just
difficult.
a matter of time.
And I happen to write characters. I write a lot of gay characters, and I write a lot of female characters, and especially women over 60s, like definitely my jam. And
bless your heart, man. There's not enough of that out there. And that's great, because seriously, there's a lot of really, really talented actresses in their 60s who are just sitting there because there's nothing for them out there.
Yeah. So I wrote this really great movie that I loved, for me, it was a passion project. It was one of the few things, I think we talked about this, that I had ever just written stream of consciousness. Yeah. Like it just sort of came in and I wrote it. And it was a great part for an older woman. And I'd had another script with a great part for an older woman. And we could never get them off the ground, right? There was, it was just like none of the women were considered like bankable movie stars. Like even Susan Sarandon was not enough to get a feature financed. It had to be like, we had to have a hot, somebody else. So it was really crazy. So that cycle went around. And the first time that I had a script start to get things attached, I co-wrote that with a friend of mine, Jennifer Carta, the one that I think we talked about that, my first co-written feature, which was originally called Hemlock Drive, and then it was called In the Wake of Things, and now it's called Haul Out the Holly, because it's a Christmas movie now. Like we have really, it's a great, great movie. But we've had that journey many, many times with like, we have Dylan McDermott and Susan Sarandon and Adam Brody attached. The financing fell through. We have, we got Mullen Ackerman and then, things. So it's just gone in this cycle, this crazy cycle where it's getting optioned and then nothing. And then, so ultimately.
And there's nothing you can do about that, right? Like you as the writer, as the creator or whatever, you just have to sort of get updates. It's like you send it off into space and you're just getting updates back. There's really nothing you can do, or is there? There's not really a way to like put your finger on the scale, is there?
The thing you do is you get it out to people. You find producers, right? And if a producer attaches and they have a strategy and a plan, you see if that feels good for you.
And is that you who's doing that, or is that the agent that's doing that?
My experience is, and I don't know if this is true for everyone.
Well, sure. I'm just like by what you've experienced.
Yeah, there's usually a script, a brand new, fresh spankin', this has never been done before script will go out.
Sure.
And sometimes it'll get sold, or somebody will pick it up and go, hey, we want to option this, and sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad script. It could be a script that everybody in town loves, but they just don't, there's not a bankable, right? They're like, well, who's the big male star that we're going to put in this? You know what I mean? It's only roles for women. I'm just saying, those things were kind of realities of the business at the time. Thank God that I don't think they are anymore, but people are really trying to get strategic about how to make movies. And it's not looking super good, but it's also looking super good, and I can talk about that later. Okay. But anyway, so it went out with the agents, and then if nothing happens, then you always have this great script, and there's a lot of producers that like it, and a lot of the indie darlings that you've seen and loved, they weren't made. They're indie darlings because there's so many people who are going to say no because it doesn't fit the model for what we think. If you're trying to make money in the world of movies, there's things that aren't going to fit, right?
Right. Yeah, it's not that 4-quadrant movie.
Right. So that's a really tricky thing, and it's also a thing where it's very saturated. Like everybody in town wants to make a movie, calls themselves a producer, And it's a great, we will all learn everything about how to make a movie, but actually making a movie and finding the money to make a movie is like a different thing, right? And it's terrifying. That's the thing nobody tells you. I mean, in any situation, it's terrifying to be like, oh, wow, no, we're really greenlit? This is really happening? Oh, wow. Okay. So anyway, so I was on we sent it to so-and-so. Oh, so-and-so passed. Oh, we sent it to so-and-so. They attached. Oh, I was on that cycle with a few scripts getting picked up by independent producers. We have a table read. We got this, and I was getting
while this
frustrated.
is going on.
Yeah.
Like you're continuing to work, right? Like you're still writing other things. You're still producing other things. You're directing shorts and stuff too. In the background, you're getting calls and emails about this is up, this is down. It's like stock market. It's like, okay, these are really excited about this, but this one's not doing as well. Oh, now there's interest in this. And you just sort of have to go, great, or, oh.
Totally. That's exactly right. And that's one thing that I would say, I think it's very good to have a really positive outlook and to be like, this movie's getting made, and to see it. I think I'm a big believer in that because that will make you keep sending it to people and keep asking the right questions and keep pushing and keep being innovative. I think that's a great muscle for everybody to have because it's just better to wake up and feel hopeful and excited about your work, right?
Right.
That said, as much as I think you should fight like hell for every project that you believe in, I think you shouldn't have one or two.
Oh, okay.
So what I have done is I'm always writing the next thing. Yeah. And the next things that I was writing were things I really believed about because it's not good. It's very hard for me to write things I don't believe in. That's my brand. That's how I work. Yeah. And I started to sort of write things that felt doable. I started to think about movies in terms of there's that ranch, like my grandparents have a ranch in South Dakota, so maybe I could, is there a story I could make out of a small town, Chamberlain, I know a bunch of people in Harper, Texas, where I grew up. I'm like, I've written many things that I imagine shooting there, because I'm like, I know my friend has a ranch with 2 houses. I could house a whole crew there, and I could shoot on that long street, and I have friends all over town, and I could use the Longhorn Cafe for my little restaurant. Like, I definitely started to think in terms of that and there's this really great guy. He's a great producer, Mark Stolaroff. He's produced a couple of my buddies' films. Henry Burials, he's a writer-director, and Mark produced a couple of his films, and he also produced the movie that my husband did. So this is the thing. So I'm writing and directing, and I'm trying like anything to get a movie off the ground. And then this guy, Henry's like, let's make a movie with my husband. And they did. He wrote it. They shot it. It looks beautiful. It didn't like go to Sundance or anything, but it did a bunch of festivals. It got bought by IFC, and now it's on television. Right now, it's on Hulu.
Hey, yeah,
right. And I'm sitting there going, "What is the difference between Henry and me?" And the truth is, it was really just that, like, this guy Mark. He does this. I think it's called No Budget Film School. Is his website?
Oh yeah. I've been there.
Mark Stolaroff is his name. But he's so great because he really believes that there are a lot of really great stories that are trapped in this need for $1 million. And you can be very innovative. You can write to your resources. You can make a great story that's very doable. And these days with indie film being the way that it is, it's kind of the new model. And it's a really cool, like theater, right? Sometimes there's great creativity that comes from lack. You can't show the budget for the spaceship. So how do you fake a spaceship on the stage, right? How do you get the alien arrival with what you have? That's the same thing for indie film. And I always played with that with my shorts. Like I loved like my first short had a quote unquote like a car crash, right? Uh-huh. And I just did a cool angle and like had the guy go like this, like he's seeing a car, and I had a sound effect and a hubcap that rolls on the street, right?
Yeah.
You just fake stuff. So anyway, that was something that I got excited about creatively too. And I wrote a movie that I thought was going to be so easy to do because it was my Hell or High Water movie. And from the beginning, I was like, I'm making this movie. I don't care if I'm shooting it on iPhones. I don't care if I'm bringing 10 of my people, my friends who are great actors, up to the camp. And we're all going to literally camp for 4 days. And we're going to shoot this movie in like real time. Like, this is how I'm going to do this.
And this was a feature?
Yes.
Okay. So it really was like that story.
I wrote a story that could happen in 3 days.
Yep.
That happened in 3 days at a campground.
You wrote to your limitations, which is always great.
Yep.
And then shot something you could shoot, so it didn't involve cranes or drones or big explosions.
Yep. I wrote for actors that I knew and loved, and I made it very what I love about rom-coms, right? Because it's like sort of an anti-rom-com because the lead ends up single and happy. That was another goal of mine. I wanted to write a movie where the woman learns to love herself at the end and not. I know that it's way more charming than what I just said. That sounds very, but I was excited to see that.
Sure.
It was like, oh wow, she kind of gets it at the end. Anyway. So I wrote with all of my limitations in mind and also what I had. I knew I had great actors that I knew and loved that would definitely go and camp in the woods with me. And I believed in my ability to make it interesting and cool and good, even though it wasn't the traditional way that people do this. And I was never afraid of that. So I wrote a script. I loved it. I had table reads.
Okay.
Because you always have to table read your scripts.
Sure.
Because you'll really understand. Yeah.
What did that, specifically in this situation, what did that process teach you? I mean, like hearing the words out loud, obviously for dialogue is a big thing. Like, I thought that in my head, they went da 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 da, and you went da 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 da, and it's like that kind of thing. It's like, or boy, that line didn't work at all. But like specifically for this one, hearing it out, did you just hear that, like what dialogue works, or did you actually feel like, oh, we need a scene here, or that needs to go?
Yes.
From what you remember, I know it was years ago.
No, I do remember. Here's what I love about table reads is, there's magic that happens, which is if an actor is fumbling over a line, you can always tell the difference. Like sometimes it's like, oh, I guess you didn't read the script before.
Yeah.
But
that's always a fun thing because you don't want to call them out, but at the same time, we all know.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, if there's any actors listening, always read the script before.
Always read the script first, because not only does the writer know, but the other actors also know.
Yeah. And also, it's your opportunity. I've had people win me over at table reads.
Wow.
Oh my God. There are people that I know now I would cast in anything. and I have offered them anything because
Yeah.
every table read, they're flawless.
Yeah.
And you go, I trust that person. They could do anything. So anyway, the table reads, first of all, you if an actor's fumbling over a line, I love this magic. You look at the line and you go, oh, wow, it doesn't really make sense. They fumbled because they didn't really know what they were saying, and I realized that's because I don't know what they're saying, right? So sometimes it clues you in like that. Sometimes it's like, oh, God, the first draft I remember, I'm like, oh, geez, I wrote the same scene like 8 times in a row. You start to recognize, oh, they all have the same rhythm. It's the same story beat. Like, what are they doing? Or you have like a turn of phrase that you really liked, and it turns out like 3 characters say it, and you're like, oh, no. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there was one, the first draft, I will never forget this. Like the 2 women who were supposed to be best friends were really like kind of going at each other a little bit. And I was like, oh, they're doing that because I haven't been clear. Like I haven't made it clear how good friends they are to this moment. Yeah. So that was the thing that really informed, And there were things like I was writing an ensemble comedy, and that while I love ensemble comedies, people really do need their main hook.
Yes.
They need their one person that they kind of can identify with or follow or want to follow that one story. So I ended up, it was really a fully ensemble comedy, and I ended up going back and doing another pass on it to make it a little bit more of this one character story. And it kind of was her story, but I just fattened it up a little bit.
Yeah, the forgettable movie Graveyard is full of ones that people that do that. Because there's a lot of them that you're like, wow, everyone in this movie are amazingly talented people, but it just doesn't ever come together. And you go like, how can you get this much talent and not do it? I think that's part of it, is not having that hook, that through line, that something that the audience doesn't get onto. It's just a bunch of people talking at each other. Yeah. Yes. When you move on. I don't want to call any movies out, but I think we all know some ones that you've watched and gone, oh.
Yeah, oh, that's too bad. Yeah. Yeah, so the table read is really helpful for me for that. And also with a comedy, I don't know how it is for dramatic, except people are crying. I guess because...
And a lot more pauses, I would think.
Yeah. Well, there is that too. Like you kind of just get this sense of like, because actors are so good at going, well, I'm doing something in this scene. I'm trying to accomplish something. I have an objective, right? Yeah. And so you learn really fast if you're like, oh, I haven't given them anything to do. They don't know what they're doing because the script doesn't know what they're doing. And that's really helpful, because when you're writing it, it all sounds so great to you. And that you're, to your point too, with the rhythm of how things should go. It's so great when an actor takes your idea and makes it their own, and it still works, because then you go, oh, okay. And if you've had a few table reads and that joke always kills, or, for me with comedy, I'm always listening for where they laugh, but I want those guaranteed laughs, and it really can also help you to decide what to cut and what not to cut, Yeah. The laughs are an important thing, and the redundancy is important. Yeah, I shot this little pilot, and it was an indie pilot, but my friend came, Brian Palermo. He's a groundling and an improv guy, and he did one part. Literally, his part was opening the car door for a woman and escorting her into the house. That's it. That was all he had to do, and every time he did it, we would bust out laughing. It was a walk from a car to the house. And he did it in a funny way. We were like, Brian Palermo. Like, it was amazing. You go, that's why you cast a really talented guy for that one tiny little part, because it makes a difference, right? Yeah, it's that funny bones. Yeah. It's like some people just have that thing. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really great thing about table reads, is to see. And also, for me, it's that's the time where you really have to hear notes. Okay. And you're so in your head about it. You hear notes, and my rule for notes is always like, look, if I get the same note 4 times, different table reads. Yes. Because when everybody's in a room, everybody will get swayed over to the strongest note in the room sometimes. Yeah. Right. So I obviously, because it's my podcast, I guess I'll take us into the weeds. I like to go into the minutia. So sure. when you do this, and you have like your table read, so
where, I guess we'll talk specifically about this one. Where were you having this? Was this like your first one? Did you get like a living room, like, or did you get like an office space kind of thing? Like, what is the environment like that you would get people together?
I've done conference rooms.
Okay.
I've done living rooms. I've done around a kitchen table.
Okay.
I've done theaters that, we got for the day. It's wherever you can have enough tables and chairs and pencils and scripts and water bottles and,
right.
That everybody feels comfortable and it feels professional.
Do you feed them?
That's an interesting question. It depends on what time it is.
Okay.
Generally, people don't want to eat, but I always have something because in case they show up hungry, they need something, right?
Right,
you have
exactly.
nuts and fruit and, I have had the occasional hey, there's chili on the stove. If it's a dinner time thing, I'll feed everybody. If it's at my house,
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's just, yes, you definitely provide water and pencils and scripts for everybody.
Sure. And so you find you get different results based on environment, or is it just like, we're getting together? No, it's just like it is what it is, no matter where you are.
No, the actors that I've worked with are just so good. Like I said, the one time I've ever seen an actor be unprofessional is when they clearly had not read the script, worked on the jokes.
Yes.
If they blow jokes repeatedly, then you're like, whoa, you can't do that. You gotta, I get the best actors I can because I know that if they can't make it work, nobody can.
Yeah. There's a very funny story that Paul F. Tompkins tells in Laboring Under Delusions. It's a special, which is about all the jobs he's held. And one of them was he got to be an actor in Paul Thomas Anderson movies. So he got to do at the script read for Magnolia. And all the cast of Magnolia were there. Oh. So so Tom Cruise is there and Jason Robards is there. I mean, they're, John C. Reilly is there. They're all there. Oh my
God.
And so he shows up and says, "Oh, you read all the scripts?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I read the script." He's like, "Okay, well, we have a couple extra parts that you're going to be playing because the other people didn't show up." And so he had 10 characters. That's a big ensemble movie. He had 10 characters he had to portray on the spot. Wow. And so he'd be going along, and he said, it's one thing when everything stops, and you realize, oh crap, I'm that person too. But it's another thing when that happens, and Tom Cruise turns to you and goes, I think that's your line there, buddy. Oh, no. Thank you, biggest movie star in the world. I mean, it's really, really funny.
What does Tom Cruise know? Oh, wait.
Those who want to hear a story much better told by him, check out that special. It's very, very funny. So then each, are you having the same people back? When you so you do one, you get the notes, you have the stuff, then you go and you set up another one to see sort of what the new draft, I guess. Yep. Are you having the same people around the table?
So this is interesting because this gets into a little bit of how you're going to get a movie made.
Yes. There we go.
Okay. So
you start. I assume you start at your house and then you sort of get more quote unquote professional as you are sort of looking for money and actors to hire. So
yes, yes and no. If you don't hire actors by table reading them.
Okay.
Right. That's not if you have a friend who you want to see how they do with a role, you know what I mean? Okay. And you like them and you think they might be right for it, that's a great opportunity for them to show themselves to the producers because it could be we don't care that he or she isn't a name, that we've got to have them, right? Okay. Then before you go on, who else is in the room then? Besides, so you're there obviously at the table doing stuff. You have a bunch of the actors who are doing the roles, and then who else is sort of around? So if there are producers attached, generally, if producers are attached, then the producers come. Okay. If I'm in the early stages of a script and I'm doing table reads to hear the words and to figure out what's wrong with it, it's usually just me. Okay. And I might invite writer friends or friends who love movies and love to talk about movies just to hear it, because I think it's also very good to have people who are just hearing and not reading.
Yes.
So
you have a little bit of an audience? That
I
you
do.
Sort of
I have
like,
2 or 3 people.
Okay.
Generally, it depends on what I can get, but generally
sure.
there's always somebody who wants to hear and talk about it, which is great.
Yeah.
And so you get people who you learn to trust that they give really good notes and that they have good insights.
Yeah.
And again, I found that notes are more effective the more people, because it gives you that great balance of, 6 out of 10 people had that note and agreed with that. Or, wow, half the room didn't get the ending. I thought it was just my husband, but like, wow, more people than just, And also, you get the great equalizing perspective of, oh, I hate that scene. You got to cut that scene. And then there's another person who's like, that was my favorite scene in the whole thing. So it's great, actually, because then if you love that scene, then you can go, listen, is it really a problem, or did that person just not like it? Like there's, you kind of go, well, I need to choose based on how I feel about it instead of, it's not really a note, it's like a preference. And that's a writer's decision to make.
Right.
But yeah, so I always have a few people because... Yeah, I think maybe it does. I don't know. Everybody's always so good. They always bring their best. I don't think about it as providing an audience. I think about it as having ears that aren't reading it. And you need someone to read the stage directions. I think it's really important as a writer to hear it and not read the stage directions.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask if you actually did anything, or are you just sitting back?
I have read the stage directions.
Okay.
If it's a really quickie, like I'll even have people come over to read scenes out loud.
Oh, wow.
That's more rare, but it's so helpful,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you get to the end part, and I'm sorry, you had a thing you were going, and I keep taking you off on other things because I keep thinking of other diversions of stuff I want to ask.
Yeah.
When you get to, so you finish the read through, and then you get to the part where you doing the Q&A. Do you run that, or do you have somebody sort of like, all right, let's talk about what we had here, like what?
So yes,
I've done it both ways. I've had the director essentially do it, and that was okay. I've tried to do it and got nothing, and I've also had a professional do it, and I was like, this is how I want it every single time because she was so good.
So I think it depends on who has set up the table read and for what reason.
Sure.
When the producers are the ones that set up the table read because they want to hear it out loud and they want to maybe use it to help pitch, or they want to get feedback from people that they trust, generally then they would probably lead that.
Okay.
I am the writer and the director on most of the projects.
Right.
So when I'm the writer and the director, I usually am right in there. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
When it's a work in progress and I'm the one taking the notes and interpreting the notes.
Yeah.
When that's a really good question, actually. When it's just me as a writer, generally the producers do lead more, or the director would lead more, because the writers are just taking notes on what people are saying, and then we take it all away and we will interpret all of it. That's the experience I had with that. Then the other thing is when you do a screening. During a screening, when people are giving notes on an actual movie, generally the writer, director, and or both will actually leave the room.
Oh, interesting.
Or there will be an anonymous survey that people will fill out and write stuff down, or they'll do it on their computers.
I've done a couple of those.
Yeah, because for whatever reason, once it's actually done, people need to be brutally honest, but they have a hard time doing that if they think they're going to, it's hard after there's a full-blown movie and they're like, oh, can I say this,
Yeah.
With a script,
especially
I think,
knowing that you're in the room.
Yeah.
They're not as quite as free because they're like, I don't want to hurt its feeling.
I mean, the script is like such a playful time, right? It's such a lonely, hard process to write a script. It's so hard and confusing, but it's also wonderful when people give you an idea or they mention something and you go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Or they help you, understand why it's not working.
Yeah.
You have to
I remember I left something out of the sort of mythology. There's a magic element to it. And people were like, well, why does this thing do that and not this? And I was like, oh, you care? Like, I didn't put any of that stuff in because I didn't think anybody. They would just be like, they want to see people doing stuff. They don't really care about what the rules are. I'm like, someone cared about the rules. Yay!
Yeah.
I know exactly what the answer to that is. I just cut it out because I didn't think anyone would notice or care.
Yeah. It's really great to. It's like when people develop stand-up sets, right? They tell 10 minutes of jokes and they get maybe 1 or 2 minutes of really good laughs, and then they ditch the 8 minutes and they do those 2 minutes again, and they tell 8 more minutes of jokes.
Yeah.
And from that, they get 2 more minutes. And so with your table read, it's a little bit like you kind of just have to go, I think this works. And then people can sort of pick it apart. And then you take the things you're like, because you can feel it. You can really feel it when something is singing and people are emotional and like they really get it and they're laughing and they're invested. And then you can feel when they're like,
Yeah, when it's like, ooh, it's really dragging right here.
Yeah.
Like you have to like make a note, like,
But
pick it up, pick it up, pick it up.
But it's important to get those scenes, the ones that you go like, okay, this is the tone of my movie. This is where it really works. I need to do more like that. Or I need to fulfill more promises of the premise, right? This is such a great sequence. Why? Oh, because it did this. Okay, let me see if I can make that go bigger,
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about soliciting good answers from the people? Like, how, like, I've seen it where people, they like, you finish thinking, they're like, so, what do you like? And that was like, that's the thing. Like, how do you, what are the prompts you use? 'Cause I think this is really valuable information because I've seen it go so horribly wrong. That like any of your advice and like what you do to get good responses from people, stuff you can actually use and not just, oh, you liked it, thanks. Which is good too. But we are social animals. We need to have the validation, but
we do.
I also need to make this better. So
I can tell you one thing that you don't say.
Okay.
And that is, did you like the lead character? That's such a horrible question, especially when you're writing flawed people who are in trouble or in conflict, right? Like nobody
Do we like Walter White?
Right, exactly. Nobody likes anybody on Succession, and it's a hugely popular show, and I can't wait to watch another season of it. So
same thing with Arrested Development. Do we really like them?
Oh my God, it's a terrible question. Thank you for validating this for me, because I'm like, right?
The worst.
So, I always, as a writer, I mean, generally, what I would say is if I really, if people aren't jumping in, I ask the questions that I need answered. Like, what am I going? You should really come into a table read kind of knowing what you want to get from this, right? Like, what a good question that I like to ask is, what does this remind you of? If you were leaving the theater, and you were going to go tell 3 of your friends about what you just saw, or, what would you say to them? What is it evoking for you? Did you feel, good. Were you invested in whether or not she ended up with him or without him? And if there's logistical things like, well, do you think the ranger's real or not? Like, there's things sometimes I'll if there's genuine questions I have, like, what did you think of the main character's relationship with her friend? Like, did you get that? Like, if there's things that you've tried to do subtly, but you're not sure if they're working, did you get that they were on the rocks? Did you get that they haven't talked and blah, blah, blah? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that way, if that's important to your story and you know that, then, and I find that once you start talking story with people, inevitably it makes them go, oh, yeah. Something that they never would have just thought of if you said to them, what did you like? Yeah. You know what I mean? You kind of lead them with, there's this part. What did you think of this? Did you, did this make sense to you? Were you invested in that? That kind of stuff. Yeah. It gets people, it's important. And I think as a director and a writer, when I was really lost, I would always go with, well, how do I want people to feel after this scene? Right?
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
I want them to feel like, oh no, the best friends are fighting. Oh no, or, oh wow, this is the bottom. This has to be the bottom. Or, oh God, please don't say that. Like, what do I want them to be feeling? And have I accomplished that?
Yeah, I've had it where after a reading and the obligatory applause, which is always nice.
Oh yeah, that's
like,
very nice.
Yeah, we finished that. Nice.
Yeah.
then the director opened it up, and it was just like, it was vicious. It was just like, and it's like, and understand, obviously we are sensitive artists, but at the same time, I get it. Like, okay, I like, there's problems, I need to work on them. Okay, no problem. But like, all of it was that. And it was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, all right, so I should just set it on fire is what you're telling me. That's what I'm hearing. But like, ooh, it was rough.
No, that's really not helpful.
No, that was super not helpful. I mean, like, I sort of made notes, like, sort of like, okay, there's a problem here and problem there, and tried to be, and not defensive, which is difficult to do when you're first thing. But then later on, I actually had a director run just for that, just to run the Q&A after. And she was magnificent because she asked all these questions, and I was like, oh, like, can you teach a class? Because it was so great. She would say, like, what are the parts you really enjoyed? What you were really invested? What were your favorite, like, what was your favorite line? What was, like, that kind of stuff. So then you're like, oh, okay, good. So some of the stuff is working. You start with that. And then she would go, okay, then what were the parts that you checked out on? What were the things that you were suddenly found yourself wondering, what you're getting for dinner? Like, where was things that you and I was like, oh, that's also really good information. And then she also said, and I don't want to hear your ideas. I don't want to hear any fixes. I just want to know the parts that you thought, like, oh, I didn't like this part, wasn't really clear to me what was going on, and stop there. And I was like,
that is
I want to marry you.
Yeah, that's a great note. That's a great thing to say, because
I wish anyone who runs any type of thing would do those three basic things. And she did more, but like those three basic things, I think, would make every single one of these table reads better.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that there are times, like, if the conversation is steering that way, I've also seen writers get very gracious and just be like, I know how to fix it. Like, once I know the problem, I'll figure out how to fix that. But also sometimes hearing people's ideas for fixes, you can glean like, what do they say? What's the note underneath the note, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if someone is giving you one of those, she shouldn't be in love with him. She should be in love with her best friend, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of go, oh, okay, so, and why, you can get the note underneath the note. Like, so clearly I didn't set up why she would be in love with him, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if someone's saying it, but they're offering a fix that is incorrect, you then just go, yeah, but okay, so the problem was you didn't, usually you can ask a follow-up question of like, so that relationship didn't make sense to you, or you didn't see what she saw in him, or you didn't see why she needed that money so badly. So when she robbed the bank, it was out of the blue for you,
Yeah.
Things like that. Like, because they'll say something like, can it not be about a robbery? You're like, well, no.
Well, it's called the heist.
Exactly. Yeah, but, so then you go, that's a terrible note, right? But it's also lets you know, well, I didn't set this up properly then. The stakes are not high enough. It's not believable enough, right?
So are you doing that before you send it out, or are you still like, is there still a version of the script that's out there going around while you're doing these things and trying to do it? Or is this what you have to get into, I don't know, fighting weight before you sort of send it out into the world?
Well,
or it varies by project, but like in your experience.
It does. There is, if you have a movie that is very like marketable, and good for the market, that's when it gets sent out, right?
Okay.
So for that, you really do. Usually it's you and your rep, and you work on it. You have table reads just with friends, right? You work on it. You get it to a place where you feel like you've successfully addressed the notes. And generally your rep agrees, oh, okay, it's time to send it out. And then it's sent out. And you don't touch it again, really, unless you are like now going to be in the process of making it, or, right? Like, if a producer picks it up, they're going to want to give you notes, and then you're going to do more notes and more notes,
draft
right?
based on what they, or to write to a star.
Yes.
Like Sandra Bullock's attached. You need to rewrite it for Sandra.
100%. Yeah. So the table reads in both processes, actually. One is the table read before it gets sent out to see if anyone's going to buy it. And then there's the table reads to get it into the best shape possible, because your intention is to produce it. And so you want to get into the best shape possible to get it to a producer, to get it into the hands of actors who could potentially attach to it. That's the independent production route, right? It's not you're sending your script out to be bought. You're going to make this thing.
Yeah.
So in both cases, they happen before you're going to show to people. Now, I had this script, it actually started off very interesting. I had written the main character that she was in love with a guy, and then I wanted to give it to Kate McKinnon because I thought she would be perfect for it. And I had a little bit of intel that from my friend that said, like, Kate might be interested in playing more authentic roles. And I was like,
that's a very nice, subtle way of indicating that, as opposed to being like, hey.
Yeah, and then but it was perfect because it was perfect for me because my initial thought was that this woman was bisexual or a lesbian, the lead character, and my manager at the time was like, "Don't do that. You'll make it less mainstream. Like let's make this a quirky rom-com for all, for whatever that's worth." And so I was like, okay. So I wrote it. She was straight. And then when I had the opportunity to give it to Kate McKinnon, I was like, oh my God, no, I'm going to change it because it satisfied a lot. So then I had to do a pass, the sort of Kate McKinnon pass that then became the draft, actually, because I liked it so much. And that's the pass that I ended up using. Now I tweak it all along the way.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good point to make that transition then. So, at what point do you feel like, okay, now it's ready to move to the next stage? We can stop doing table reads and like I have the script I like, knowing you as the writer director will be writing and directing and changing along the way. Like, at what point do you get to where you're like, all right, it's ready? How did you feel that like now I know it's ready?
I had done my due diligence. I had had table reads. Right. I had addressed notes. I had addressed all the notes I wanted to address, Okay. And I went through several, and I would do a pass, and I would give it off to a fresh set of eyes, Yeah. I very rarely were the same people reading the script twice because I always wanted that fresh take on it,
So, like, numerically then, like, if you remember, like, how many table reads do you think Just Plus None sort of went through? And then, like, how many readers? I mean, like, I don't need you to be like, no, not 12, 13. Like, I'm just
No, probably
ballpark.
4.
Okay.
Probably 4 table reads.
All right.
And then also, like, hey, fellow writer who, like, I know you wrote a comedy. Will you take a read and tell me what you think? I had a lot of individual people giving me thoughts and notes.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like the producers all really liked it, and I really liked it. And at some point, you have to go, well, let's go make it, right? Yeah. And because this was my hell or high water, what was interesting is I wanted the script to be as good as it could possibly be no matter what. That's the first rule. I can't tell you how many times I see things. People have put so much money and energy into this thing and resources, and it looks great, and my God, they didn't get the script right.
I know.
And
I won't call it out, but I just watched a Netflix original big budget movie, and I got to think, I'm like, is this your first draft of your third act? Because it is a mess.
Right? Yeah. Although that can happen when it's overnoted too.
Sure, exactly. Like it could be that, who knows what along the way, but it was like, I was like, this is not well written because it's sort of like you could feel it sort of almost. Yeah. Falling apart the further it went. Like you spent so much time.
Things don't make sense.
Establishing, you put so much time raising the stakes, and then you get to the third act, and it's just like, and now a bunch of things explode? Oh, okay. And
the fact is, look, if you're writing a movie for Netflix,
Sure. I mean, hey, they got it made and all that good stuff, but it seems like there's some basic structural stuff.
Yes. If you're writing an indie movie that's going to be your calling card, they want to find every reason to hate your writing and hate you. No, I mean, it's gotta, if you want it to be the best, you just want it to be the best it can possibly be. So that's, if you take the time, you do all the passes. So for me, but to your point, movies are magic in a bottle. Scripts are magic in a bottle. You might write something and think it's the best thing ever. And, you got to keep writing and moving on to the next thing because it's you either have it or you don't. And it's like, it's this weird balance of you've got to give it everything you've got and do your best possible work. And you have to know when to let it go and let that be your best for the time being. And that's, so when we were moving into the like, okay, let's produce this thing, I was like, I booked a campground.
Oh, wow.
I did. It was like 4 months away.
Wow,
and I was
talk about planting your flag.
Yeah. I was like, I'm doing it, and I'm doing it, and I'm doing it. And no one's stopping me, and I'm doing it. Because I had so many movies almost get done, right?
Yeah.
And the producers were like, please, 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 you've never made a feature. Don't try to make this on like, this much money. Like, don't just bring 10 of your friends up to a campground. Like, give it what it deserves. Give it a chance. So with these producers, then we went the whole, like, let's give it to, the Kate McKinnon, and let's give it to Brittany Snow. Is that her name?
Oh, okay. Yeah. From Pitch Perfect.
Yes. Like we
and
were like,
and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. So we were like, and then finally, after we went through that process for a little bit, they were like, just give us some time. Just give us some time. Let's try to get some more money. Let's try to do this thing. And then finally, I was like, guess what? It's hell or high water time.
Oh.
So I'm doing this movie now, and we're all, and they were like on board with that. We had all sort of explored as many options as we could, and there comes this time, and we all had the capability. Like, they're brilliant producers.
Yeah.
I knew how to be really creative, and I said to the main producer, Mandy June Turpin, repeatedly, I was like, I will make it work. And I'm going to make it great. It'll be a great movie no matter what, because the story's there, the characters are there. We can get really good actors, and that's all this movie really needs. We'll make it great.
I'm more interested in creative stuff than the money stuff, but I'm always curious about like that kind of thing. So like where is it just out of pocket? Like where does the money come from at that point? Like for this particular project?
So financing for indie films is largely, it depends, right? But for the most part, if you're going to have anything that's like $1 million budget, my experience is they're like, great. Do you have Charlie Day attached? Or, that generally is what it is. You can now, as you cast, as you get people, people come in because they get excited about it. Yeah. So there's a real thing that people do, which is like fake it till you make it, which is you go with no money. Yeah. And then you start to build. And for me personally, the way that I was able to do it was we did have some money, but we also, and I had money because people knew me, and they knew that I'd been wanting to do this forever. And there were so many people rooting for me that they were like, yes. And when I said it's time, I pulled in every favor. Favor I had. And I had been directing for a long time. And I made great relationships. And I went and did, I went to panels and I helped people. And I was very active in the indie film community. And I was constantly helping other filmmakers and connecting them to people and helping people get jobs and doing the thing. So when it came time for me to say, I need a favor, I had so many people go, what can I do? And it was great. So there's sweat equity and there's a lot of stuff got donated. And then I hired people who were able to do it for the money we had to pay them and for the budgets we had. And they were so good. Like, and I can't even tell you, like, there were people that came up and worked on the movie for free. Like so many crew members did, because again, they were like, oh, it's been COVID. Do you want me to come and camp in the woods for 2 weeks working on a movie? Yes, please. Like, we're all weirdos. We like spending 12-hour days, walking around and exhausting ourselves together. And we were shooting a comedy, and it was so beautiful, So, that's the production part of it. There's a lot of steps before you get there, but yeah. Do you
at that point you set, like, you have a dream number you want to hit, or you're just like, well, we're going to raise money for X amount of time, and what we have, we go?
We had a first investor come in.
Okay.
For, a nominal amount. And then, but honestly, because I was already hell or high water, I was like, well, that's more than I thought I was going to make it with. Let's go.
Okay.
And so then as we got momentum, we took that money, we hired a casting director, we put out a breakdown. It was like, no, this movie is happening no matter what. And planting that flag, brought the rest of it. It really, people got excited. They're like, oh, this is really happening. And they read the script and they liked the script and they were like, yeah. It's a little bit like the difference between being a hedge fund manager and investing on like Robinhood or Bitcoin.
Okay.
There's people that are like, I'll dabble in this. Yeah. There's most people who invest in movies, like really, really heavy investors.
Yeah.
Anything less than $3 million isn't even worth it to them because they're only ever going to make 20% of their money back.
Right.
And it's not, so if they're donating $10,000, $50,000, that's just not that much money. And it's not worth it to them because it's in the film market, and this is true for films at any budget.
Sure.
It is a really risky investment. It's a
yeah.
It's a high return, right? You get 20% of your investment, and then you also take part in 50% of the profits however much you invested, you take a portion of 50%. That's the way the money waterfall works. But it's incredibly risky because, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, back in the 90s would have been everybody looking at Big Fat Greek Wedding or Blair Witch Project and being like, oh, I could invest $10,000 and I'm going to get $2 million back. This would be great. But then you also had studios who are willing to pay this money as opposed to Netflix, who writes you a check and then they're done.
Well, and the truth is, depending on how, there's also a huge global market, right?
True.
So all the thing that indie filmmakers are dealing with now, and again, this is like towards the end, but that we can talk about this, but there are ways to distribute your films all over the world. There are markets. My short films got distributed, and they continue to make a little bit of money. And so that's because they're being shown in, globally.
Yeah.
Not just the States.
And that's where we're going to stop the conversation for today. If you'd like to hear more of Mandy's voice, she's got her very own podcast. It's called The Mand Cave, hosted in collaboration with her friend, Mandy Kaplan. You'll find it wherever the finest podcasts are found. Thanks so much for listening. This has been the next chapter in the Curiosity Codex, but there are still many pages left to decipher. We're part of the True Story FM family of podcasts. Find out more about us at truestory.fm. Our theme music is Intrusion by Severed Personality, a.k.a. Kevin MacLeod. The voice of the Codex is Vicky Hall. Find her on the web at vickyhall.squarespace.com. And my name is Kyle Olson.
The Codex is closed. For now.